Hi, I'm Bruce Stewart of the Office of Personnel Management's Office of Diversity and Inclusion, or ODI. I'm here to talk with you today about the relationship between employee satisfaction and unconscious habits, and how they impact diversity and inclusion in the workplace. At ODI, we evaluated data from the OPM FedView Employee View Survey, often called the EVS. We found that inclusion practices are positively correlated with employee satisfaction. In other words, the more we include all employees in activities in the workplace, the more satisfied the whole team is. Being a part of a team and being included in team activities makes a stronger and more productive workplace. What is inclusion and why is it important? Inclusion is our ability to include differences in a friendly, flexible, and fair way to make people feel welcome and important. What does inclusion mean to you?
Being at home.
Belonging.
Able to bring my whole self to work.
A feeling that my unique contribution was valued.
My perspective is always considered.
I have a say in what happens.
When employees feel valued, they work more productively. Everyone wins in an inclusive workplace. Why inclusion and diversity? Because of TRIP. Teamwork and talent, retention and recruiting, innovation and ideas, performance and productivity. Believe it or not, there's actually mathematical data that supports diversity as a key to problem solving. Professor Scott Page ran various statistical analysis and discovered that groups that had a diverse makeup and a wide array of backgrounds and experiences were able to solve problems far more successfully than a group made up of experts with similar backgrounds and experience. So why is that? Well, think about a toolbox. If you have a toolbox full of screwdrivers, all you can do is tighten screws. If your toolbox has a couple of screwdrivers, a hammer, a wrench, a file, pliers, and other tools, you can accomplish a lot more. Diversity in groups can accomplish the same thing. Now, we all know that we are supposed to include others and make everyone feel valued and welcome. But how do we make that happen in the workplace? How do we make the intangible tangible? Well, we use a new IQ, our Inclusive Quotient, which measures our inclusive intelligence. Inclusive intelligence is the intentional, deliberate, and proactive acts that increase workgroup intelligence by making people feel they belong and are uniquely valued. If you do not intentionally, deliberately, and proactively include, you will unintentionally exclude. The new IQ looks at our unconscious habits. Why focus on habits? Because we all have them and unconsciously act on them. Increasing inclusive habits gives us the new IQ. In our survey analysis, we found out that there are 5 habits that encourage diversity and inclusion in the workplace. What are those inclusive habits? They're for us to be fair, open, cooperative, supportive, and empowering. Think focus. You can identify behaviors that already exist and that need to change and use these new focus behaviors to encourage diversity and inclusion in the workplace, leading to more empowerment and better productivity. Let's start by looking at fairness. Fairness in the workplace means that arbitrary action, personal favoritism, coercion for partisan political purposes, and prohibited personnel practices are not tolerated. While it seems a no-brainer, fairness dictates that appropriate steps are taken to deal with poor performers who cannot or will not improve, and that differences in performance are recognized in a meaningful way. In addition, rewards are provided in a fair manner, awarded for how well employees perform their jobs, not for longevity or non-job related activities. Diversity and inclusion are also fostered by having openness as a way of doing business. In an open work environment, creativity and innovation are rewarded. Policies and programs promote diversity in the workplace, and supervisors and team leaders are committed to a workforce representative of all segments of society as they work well with employees of different backgrounds. In a cooperative work environment, managers promote communication among different work units and support collaboration across work units to accomplish work objectives. When supervisors are supportive, it means that supervisors support the need to balance work and other life issues. Supervisors and team leaders have to provide employees with constructive suggestions to improve their job performance and talk with employees about their performance every 6 months. Supervisors and team leaders take time to listen to what employees have to say and treat employees with respect. The last focus habit is empowering. In an inclusive workplace, employees have enough information to do their job well and will feel encouraged to come up with a new and better way of doing things. In an empowered work setting, employees' talents are used well and employees have a feeling of personal empowerment with respect to their work processes. Unfortunately, we all occasionally fall victim to our unconscious habits. These unconscious habits affect our behavior negatively and impact how well we can implement the focus habits. These unconscious habits are the major challenge facing diversity and inclusion in the workplace. Unconscious habits are habits you might not always be aware of. These habits can influence how you make decisions or the way that you treat people and their ideas without you even realizing it. If you don't take the time to identify what habits you have, and we all have them, and look at how these habits affect your thinking and decisions, you might think there's nothing wrong with what you are doing now. To the outside observer, however, these actions and decisions influenced by these habits seem to be irrational or negative. While our unconscious habits are automatic and in some cases deeply ingrained, they can be changed through awareness of our unconscious biases. These habits come from unconscious biases, a term that refers to the attitudes that affect your behavior that you don't really notice. Unconscious biases influence our habits without our conscious awareness. Unconscious habits shape our thoughts and actions behind the scenes of our brain. And that's okay. That's just the way the human mind works. Think about how you might slowly pick up speed in a car when others are already speeding. This is an irresponsible act, but you do it because someone else already has done it. This action is due to an unconscious bias that because others do it, it's okay for you to do it. Unconscious biases also affect us in the workplace. As a supervisor, there are 3 different unconscious biases that you should be particularly familiar with and how these biases affect the workplace. These 3 main biases that impact the workplace are confirmation bias, like-me bias, which you may also hear referred to as in-group bias, and the broken windows bias. Each of these biases affects our habits, especially in terms of diversity and inclusion. Let's take a look at each of these biases. Confirmation bias is when you place more value on what you want to believe and place less value on what you don't want to believe. The confirmation bias leads you to be subjective when you're making decisions and removes any impartiality that you may have. When you use the confirmation bias, you confirm what you want to believe, not what the reality of the situation may be. The confirmation bias creates an unconscious habit of only seeing evidence that supports your decisions. You may have seen a manager who looks for concrete evidence that the correct decision was made instead of looking for ways in which a decision could have been improved. To avoid this bias, either consider whatever evidence you can find after a decision is made, even if it disconfirms the decision. At least you will make a better decision next time. Or avoid getting feedback from people who only provide you confirming evidence because they think that's what you want to hear. The like-me bias is one set of biases known as in-group biases. Essentially, like-me bias is exhibited whenever you give preferential treatment to members of a group you belong to. This is a bias towards a person who is like you as opposed to being different from you. One of the interesting aspects of this bias is that it has been demonstrated in randomly assigned groups as well as more organized ones. You can see like-me bias by members of groups who have been created through a coin toss or random draw, even though they had no connection before. You will also see like-me bias by fans of the same sports team or people of the same religion. When we believe that someone else is in a group to which we also belong, we usually have positive views of them and tend to give them preferential treatment. If an individual is seen as different from us, we may be very leery of working together and make false presumptions about the individual. What happens then is that the like-me bias creates a habit of working with people we already know or people we feel connected to. The connection can be as arbitrary as eye color or driving the same kind of car. To avoid this bias, always include others. Go out of your way to step out of your comfort zone and get to know some new people. You should also challenge any ideas you have about new people if they aren't like you. Just because they aren't like you doesn't mean working with them will be problematic. This last bias is the broken windows bias. This bias originates from a crime-fighting theory that says that stopping major crimes begins with stopping small ones. Under this theory, minor crimes like vandalism, public drinking, and littering create an environment in which social disorder increases, making it more likely that more major crimes will be committed. Put simply, our environment plays a large role in our behavior towards others, whether it's in your neighborhood or the workplace. However, we don't usually attribute our behavior to our environment, but falsely attribute this behavior to our core characteristics. The broken windows bias creates a habit of allowing the environment to affect our habits. It also allows others to create habits of falsely attributing our behavior to our own core characteristics instead of the environment that surrounds us. For example, an office that permits off-color humor may create an environment in which people feel less inclined to keep hurtful statements and stereotypes to themselves. To avoid this bias, remember that everyone is situated in their environment and behavior is influenced by this environment. Make sure your own environment is conducive for interaction. If you want to be inclusive, don't tolerate exclusiveness. Set a zero tolerance for exclusiveness and nip any issues in the bud. So, how do you change an unconscious habit or any habit? Habits work in 3 steps: cue, routine, and reward. A cue that triggers a specific kind of behavior, the performance routine that is triggered, and the psychological reward performing the routine. Change any one part of the process, and the other parts change too. As you work on a daily basis, keep an eye on whether you are exhibiting any unconscious biases. Remember, the focused inclusive behaviors can help you change unconscious habits and help you to provide a diverse, inclusive, and more productive workplace. If you would like any more information on any of these topics, please contact ODI